They laughed when they saw the wire. Rusty, twisted, pulled tight around broken steel plates, holding parts together that everyone knew shouldn't hold at all. In the cold mud of Eastern Europe, a German patrol froze in place, staring at an American tank they were sure was already dead. The engine coughed. The tracks moved. The guns slowly turned toward them. This tank wasn't supposed to exist anymore. It was late autumn, 1944, and the war had chewed up the land until nothing looked alive. Forests stood shredded, villages burned down to stone shells, and the ground stayed soaked with rain and oil and blood. German soldiers had grown confident here because American armor rarely survived long once it broke down behind enemy lines. Tanks needed fuel, parts, and support. Without those, they died fast. Everyone knew that. Everyone except the man inside this one. Staff Sergeant William Red Callahan wasn't famous. He wasn't a hero in the newspapers. He was a farm mechanic from Ohio who knew engines better than people and trusted wire more than orders. Back home, he'd kept tractors running through dust storms and depression, coaxing life out of machines that should have been scrapped years earlier. That background made him different from the trained tankers around him. Where they saw regulations and procedures, he saw problems waiting for solutions. When his Sherman tank threw a track during a retreat and slid into a shell crater, Command told him the same thing they told everyone else in that situation. Destroy the tank. Walk back if you can. If not, surrender. Callahan looked at the damage, wiped grease on his jacket, and shook his head. He wasn't walking anywhere. He wasn't blowing up his tank either. He had an idea, and it sounded stupid enough that even his own crew thought he'd lost his mind. Quick thing before we continue, hit subscribe if you want more incredible World War II stories like this, because we tell them every single week, and this one gets even crazier. The Sherman tank had problems, and everyone knew it. German crews mocked it openly, calling it a rolling coffin because its armor was thinner and its gun weaker than German Panthers and Tigers. German tankers trusted their machines, trusted their thick steel, and trusted that American tanks would burn once hit. That confidence came from experience, because they destroyed thousands of Shermans across North Africa and Europe, often at long range, often without taking losses themselves. They believed the American tank was cheap, rushed, and badly built, and in many ways they were right. But the Americans built a lot of them, and that changed everything. Factories back home pushed out Sherman tanks day and night, sometimes finishing one every few hours, loading them onto ships, and sending them straight to the front. The Sherman wasn't perfect, but it was simple, easy to fix, and forgiving when things broke. Crews could work on it with basic tools, and that mattered more than anyone expected. It was designed for mechanics like Callahan, men who understood that complexity was the enemy when you were alone in the field. Especially when you were alone, deep behind enemy lines, with no spare parts and no rescue coming. Callahan's tank had lost a section of its track, cracked an engine mount, and torn loose part of the side armor when it slid into the crater. The radio was dead. Fuel was low. German units were nearby. His crew waited for orders he already knew weren't coming. Instead, Callahan crawled out with a coil of baling wire he'd taken from a farm months earlier and kept for reasons even he couldn't explain. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was years of fixing the unfixable back in Ohio. Either way, that wire was about to become the difference between life and death. He wrapped that wire around cracked mounts, pulled metal back into place, and tied broken track links together just tight enough to move. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't safe. It shouldn't have worked at all. One crewman laughed and said the Germans would die laughing when they saw it. Callahan didn't laugh. He just kept tightening the wire until his hands bled, pulling and twisting with a focus that made the others go quiet. When the tank started, the crew went silent. The engine shook, rattled, and screamed like it might tear itself apart, but it ran. The tank rolled forward, slow and uneven, but moving. That was enough. Callahan made a choice right there, one that would trap them behind enemy lines for weeks. He turned away from friendly lines and drove deeper into occupied territory. If they tried running back, German forces would catch them in open ground. But if they stayed hidden, kept moving, and picked their moments, they might just survive long enough for the front to shift. At first, survival was the only goal. They hid during the day, parking under trees, inside barns, or in bombed-out buildings where shadows swallowed the tank's shape. At night, they moved, following back roads and muddy paths, always listening for engines, always watching for headlights. They avoided fights they couldn't win and struck only when surprise was absolute. One shot, one burst, then disappear. Every attack was calculated. Every route was memorized. Every sound became a warning. The Germans never expected it. Reports came in of a lone American tank appearing out of nowhere, firing once or twice, then vanishing before anyone could respond. Officers assumed it was an error or a confused unit. Then it kept happening. Supply trucks burned. Small patrols broke and ran. Communication lines went silent. And always, witnesses mentioned something strange. Wires hanging from the armor. Plates pulled out of shape. A tank that looked broken but kept moving. Some German soldiers started calling it the ghost tank, convinced it couldn't be real. One night, a German anti-tank team ambushed them from close range. A shell hit the side armor, punched through the wire-reinforced plate, and exploded inside the storage rack. Smoke filled the tank. Fire flared. The crew thought it was over. Callahan smothered the flames with a coat, kicked loose debris aside, and kept driving, grinding the damaged track forward until they escaped into the trees. The wire held. Barely. That night, he added more wire, reinforcing what had just been destroyed, building layers of improvised armor that had no business working but somehow did. Days turned into weeks. Fuel came from captured trucks. Food came from abandoned stores or grateful villagers who whispered thanks and pointed toward German positions. The tank took more hits, more damage, and more ugly fixes. Wire joined wire. Metal bent back with hammers. Oil leaks became normal. Sleep came in short bursts, always waiting for the sound of engines or boots on gravel. The crew stopped asking when they'd make it back. They just focused on the next day, the next mile, the next repair. German commanders finally realized something was wrong. This wasn't a unit. It was one tank. One tank that refused to die. They sent armor to hunt it, but heavy tanks couldn't move quietly through forests and mud. And by the time they arrived, the Sherman was gone. The crew learned to listen, learned to feel the ground through the steel, and learned when to move and when to freeze. They weren't winning battles. They were surviving. And every day they survived made the Germans more nervous, more uncertain about what else might be hiding in their own territory. On the 47th day, friendly artillery thundered in the distance. The front had shifted. American forces were pushing forward, crushing resistance that had already been weakened by confusion and fear. Callahan drove toward the sound, every bolt screaming, every wire stretched to its limit. When they broke through the trees and saw American infantry staring in disbelief, the tank finally gave up. The engine died. The tracks locked. The wire snapped. The crew climbed out, filthy, thin, and shaking, and soldiers gathered around the tank, touching the wire, laughing, swearing, and asking how it was even possible. Callahan didn't say much. He just shrugged and said machines break. But you don't quit on them just because someone says you should. That tank never fought again. They hauled it away, took photos, and wrote reports that would never fully capture what happened. But the lessons spread anyway. The Sherman wasn't about perfection. It was about keeping going. About crews who could fix anything, anywhere, with whatever they had left. German confidence had been built on stronger guns and thicker armor. But war doesn't always reward strength. Sometimes it rewards stubbornness. Sometimes it rewards a man who refuses to accept that something is finished just because it looks broken. That's the part they never laughed at again. Thanks for watching. Quick disclaimer. This story is for entertainment purposes only. Accuracy not verified. Do your own research. If you want more true World War II stories like this, subscribe now. Next time, we're diving into another moment where luck met courage and improvisation changed everything.